Hello everyone, how are you all doing? I hope you all had a fun and safe Halloween. I cannot believe it's already November. I feel like it was just summertime. In any case, today I'm bringing you a wrap-up of the latter half of October. I read a total of 10 books in October, so I'm covering 6 of them today. If you want to see a wrap-up of the other 4 books I read in October, I will link that video up above. So basically that was a wrap-up of books I read in September and the first half of October, and now we are covering the second half of October. Overall, it was one of my most successful reading months in a while. I was doing both Gothtober and Trick or Treat-a-thon. I didn't quite finish all of the prompts for both of those readathons, but I'm still pretty happy with the progress I made. I think Trick or Treat-a-thon I only came short about 2 prompts, and for Gothtober I think I had 4 left. Got to read a lot of magical reads, really creepy reads that really got me into the fall season mood. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about some books. The first book we're going to talk about is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd-Jones. This book takes place in a small village in medieval Wales, which is probably why I couldn't pronounce most of the names in this book. The main character is a girl called Aderin or Rin, and her family runs a graveyard and buries people for a living. She is the oldest and takes care of her 2 other siblings while maintaining her family's business. Both of her parents are deceased and their uncle, who is supposed to be their guardian, is missing. In the meantime, she occasionally encounters bodies that have risen from the dead called bone houses. So a bone house is basically a zombie, and Rin, when she finds one, she just kind of takes it down, destroys it, and loots whatever she can from the body. Usually this isn't a huge issue until one day a lot of them start coming into the town and attacking the locals. This plague of bone houses also coincides with the arrival of a young and mysterious map maker. He teams up with Rin to go and find the source of the bone houses and destroy it. I really liked this book. I think I even liked this more than Emily Lloyd-Jones' other book I read. I think it was The Hearts We Steal. The lore around the bone houses was really integrated with the fairy lore of the locals. So we got to hear a lot of folk tales that Rin had heard from her parents or from the locals, so I really loved that fairy tale atmosphere that's full of stories. There's not many ways you can make me care about a zombie story. Zombies aren't really my favorite creature, but apparently when you mix it in with fairy lore, that's how to sell them to me. And ultimately this was just a really emotional story about 2 people going on a journey to get closure with death in their lives. I was just so moved at the end. I had so many feels. So I really liked this book. It wasn't like the most rich or most developed world or story ever, but it was quite simple and very emotional and quite solid. Overall, this was a 4-star book for me. I love the mixture of creepy zombie vibes with the fairy tale atmosphere and the characters, and great setup and payoff in the end. Just a great simple story. Next up, I read The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang, which is of course the second book in the Poppy War trilogy. I was really looking forward to this read because when the Poppy War ended, the first book, it left us in a place where we could go pretty much anywhere with the plot and with the main character Rin. So the premise of this series is that it's kind of a fantasy take on modern Chinese history. So in the previous book we were dealing with the Second Sino-Japanese War, and in this book we were dealing with the Chinese Civil War. And this book really took it up a notch. I loved the political intrigue, a lot of the military machinations and strategy, and all of the stuff that Rin is going through with other characters. I have to say I enjoyed her relationships with other characters rather than Rin herself, because I get that she's angry and traumatized, but sometimes she just really frustrated me with how gung-ho she was about just killing everything in her path. And in this book we also got to see the Western faction in this world, the Hesperian Hesperians, so they are the analog for Westerners in this world. And I just loved seeing the nuances of the power struggle between the Nikara, so the Chinese basically, and the Hesperians, because you can see the Hesperians are really xenophobic and really want to impose their religion onto these people and just really see them as inferior. But at the same time, you can see the hubris of the Nikara people and how they are just really set in their ways. So it's like both people are wrong in their own ways, and it's just a really great dynamic to watch. Like, I was just on my toes the whole time waiting for something bad to happen because you knew it was going to happen, and Rebecca Kwong really knows how to set up that tension really well. She never lets you rest easy even when things seem to be going easy. Like, at one point the war seems to be going well, but you know something is going to go wrong. And the end is just such a roller coaster ride. It was just, everything was terrible and everything was fine, and then everything is going to go to shit in the next book. I'm not one of those lucky people who's got an arc for the next book yet, so I'm really looking forward to reading it. But yeah, it's such a great second installment. So much tension, so much angst. The next book I read was Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is about a very elite, somewhat unconventional boarding school. So this story basically takes place in two parallel timelines, one in the 30s and one in present day. So in the 1930s, a very high-profile, famous kidnapping and murder took place at this school, and in the present day, our main character, Stevie Bell, really wants to solve this murder. So she enrolls at the school with the goal of solving the murder. So I definitely loved the dark academia atmosphere of this school. It's a school that's isolated in the mountains that's only accessible by one singular coach. I love the descriptions of the school, and I really liked the mystery. The mystery was really engaging. My issue with this book was primarily how John Green the teenagers were. So basically we got introduced to a bunch of the other students in the book, and to me it just felt like we were being introduced to artsy kid with this quirk, and this kid with these quirks, and then this kid with these quirks. And after a while, I couldn't really tell the kids apart because they were all just quirky kids, and I couldn't really distinguish them from each other. It's almost like they were the same amount of quirky, so they ended up being the same. Because basically, I've encountered the really quirky philosophical teenager so many times in books like John Green's that when I encountered this, I think I just wasn't in the right mindset, so I was just a bit frustrated with that. I also had issues with the pacing in the first half of the book because basically we spent a lot of time with Stevie as she's trying to navigate this new academic environment and her shenanigans with other students and her making friends, and also all of their activities and everything. And so I was just not as interested in that part of the book because I didn't even find the other students that interesting in the first place. But then the mystery elements started hitting about halfway through the book, and that's when it got really engaging for me. I really liked all the problem solving and deduction that took place in that part of the book, so I wanted more of that and less of just hanging out with Stevie and her friends. Also, there was just a random romance that was shoehorned into this book, and I don't know how I feel about it. I thought it was kind of random, and I don't particularly like the love interest, but we'll see how it develops in the next few books. Overall, I gave this 3 stars on Goodreads. It wasn't really the best for me. I liked the mystery and the atmosphere, but I wasn't super connected or invested in the characters, except for maybe Stevie. I'm not averse to reading the rest of this series because I want to know what happens in the story. I want to know the resolution of this mystery, but this first book didn't wow me like I thought it might. Next up, I read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Of course, you may know the Netflix series that was based on this book. However, that is a very, very loose adaptation. The book is very, very different. This book is, of course, about a very old house called Hill House. It is said to be haunted and has a long and contentious history. So an occult scholar named Dr. Montague recruits 2 women to come and stay at the house for a bit and test out its hauntedness. These 2 women are called Eleanor and Theodora, and they are very different. Eleanor is a very mousy, woman who has spent the last decade of her life taking care of her mother, while Theodora is a very bohemian, artistic woman, and she's very free-spirited. They get together with Luke Sanderson, who is set to inherit Hill House, and so they all settle in for a few days to observe the house. And of course, strange phenomena do start happening at the house. There is a lot of banging in the walls. All of the inhabitants can hear voices laughing at night, and they start to see actual ghosts on the house grounds. I think what stood out to me was how much of a psychological horror this was, as much as it was a real ghost horror. It is as much about how these individuals receive or perceive the phenomena in the house as much as it is about the actual house itself. In fact, we don't really get accustomed to the actual ghosts themselves like we do in, say, the show. Strange things do happen, but the ghosts remain quite abstract, while the main focus is how everyone really is psychologically affected by all of these happenings. So I really liked that aspect of the book. What I didn't like, however, was how bone dry the first half of the book is. Basically, we're getting accustomed to each of the characters. We're getting to know all of them, and we're just sitting with them and how they think. But the way the dialogue was written and how their internal thoughts were written and how they were all like buying clothes to prepare for this whole house stay, it was just so dry, and I got through it because I get what Shirley Jackson was trying to do, but I just didn't like that aspect of the book. So it was just a breath of fresh air when all of the ghost phenomena starts happening and we actually get to see how each of the characters receives all of these events. So it was just a breath of fresh air when we actually get to the horror aspect of the novel and things actually start happening and our characters actually get affected by everything that's going on. But then the ending is super, super abrupt, so it was like we had finally got things going, but then we came to a screeching halt in the book, which I get why, but also it was just a tad unsatisfying, not completely. So I also gave this book 3 stars. I mean, I get why it's so famous and why it's quite revolutionary, but at the same time, I could have done without the first half of the book being as dry as it was. Next up was quite a filler read for me. I read the 3rd volume of Charles Soule's 2017 Darth Vader comics run. This volume is called The Burning Seas. It covers issues 13 through 18. It primarily covers the newly established Galactic Empire's takeover of Mon Cala, which is basically Admiral Akbar's world. If you've seen the original Star Wars films, you know Admiral Akbar quite well. So while we're seeing this invasion slash takeover, we also encounter surviving Jedi who are still in hiding and how they are still scheming to take back their order, basically. And at the center, of course, is Darth Vader and how he continues to be a killing machine. Because Darth Vader 2017 takes place basically right after Revenge of the Sith. So Anakin Skywalker has just become Darth Vader. Like, his wife has just died. He has just become incredibly deformed. So he has basically nothing to live for except be as powerful as possible. So I did enjoy the previous 2 volumes, which I actually read as one compendium volume. But this volume, I liked it, but I don't think it delved much into Darth Vader's psychology in the way that I really like these comics to do. We basically see how the Galactic Empire forced a lot of worlds to conform to their rule and their terms. So I like seeing that stuff, but I really wanted to see Vader and more of his psychology and his internal workings, and I didn't feel like I got enough of that in this book. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the run. Hopefully I'll enjoy it a bit more than this volume. And last but not least, I read The Magicians by Lev Grossman. So I kind of had the impression that this was depressed Harry Potter, so basically collegiate Harry Potter, but super mature and with a touch of Narnia. But now having read the book, I would say it's much more The Secret History meets Narnia. So the main character of this story is Quentin Coldwater. He's a very severely depressed teenager, and one day he gets invited to take an exam to enter into a very prestigious magical school. So this commences his journey to becoming a magician, and for a little bit it seems like all of his dissatisfaction with his life has now been been solved. But it turns out there's also a lot of hardship along the way, a lot of grueling exams, and also a lot of dangerous creatures as well. So this book is an interesting case because I went into this as a real lover of the show. I'm a huge fan of the show on Sci-Fi, and I was bracing myself for a rough time because so many people, so many reviews on Goodreads were just like, oh, I really didn't like this book. The show is so much better. I'll just stick with the show. I really didn't like any of the characters. And it's quite true that Quentin is nowhere near as likable as he is on the show. He's already not that likable on the show. He's straight up kind of a piece of shit in this book. Like, he's just a horrible person at times, even to the people he cares about. And of course the people around him aren't that much better. They're also really decadent and flawed in their own ways, or really uptight. But the thing is, I wasn't bothered that much by their unlikability. I just found it really a realistic portrayal of people in real life that I've encountered. And also I think the academic atmosphere really brought me flashbacks of academia and how rough it can be and how it can affect people. I think I really identified with Quentin's initial passion about discovering magic for the first time and becoming a magician, and his excitement, coupled with his kind of disillusionment in a way, how he discovers it's a real world with real struggles and he still has to put in the work and it's still grueling and rough. And in a way, I could really identify with that journey because I know what it's like to go into different academic environments, start a new degree, and be really passionate and want to put my heart and soul into this subject, and only to have that be tested by lots of exams, a lot of hard work, really steep learning curves. And so I think this book was a really realistic take on how we're always kind of chasing the next big thing, the next big adventure, and we think that is a panacea for all of our problems when it really isn't. It's really up to us internally to find satisfaction and joy. It could be a magic school or a magical world, as we find later on, and it still wouldn't solve your problems or your mental health. And I really loved the worlds that we were given. It was kind of a soft magic system, but that was fine. I really like soft magic systems, and I liked seeing all the mechanics of how this world works and how when all these students graduate, they don't act that much different from real graduates in real life. So I liked seeing a lot of these weird magical concepts coupled with these really real life issues. So I really loved that aspect of the book, and also the writing is just beautiful. Lev Grossman is just a really good writer. I could have done without a lot of Quentin's male gaziness. Like he looks at his teachers like they are sex objects, and the girls around him like they're sex objects, and I'm like, okay, I can do without a lot of this. But overall, I really liked what Lev Grossman was going for. I was surprised how much time passed in this book. Like, in this book, Quentin and his friends complete their degrees before going on these big adventures, whereas in the show, like, the stuff with the Beast and Fillory, it starts happening almost on their first week of school, like immediately, and it's not even clear in the show whether they complete their degrees or not. And the Asian parent in me is just like, they at least finished their degrees before going on these adventures. So on the one hand, it did slow the pacing of this book a little bit because we kind of spent a lot of time just going through Quentin's life at the school, and it's mostly kind of episodic almost. So in terms of actual plot trajectory, it's actually towards the last third of the book, I think. But on the other hand, I liked the opportunity it gave us to just sit in this world and get to know it and enjoy it and see how the characters interact with it. So overall, I really liked that about the book. I gave this 4 stars on Goodreads. It was enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this series. So that is it for my October wrap-up. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like it if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel. Let me know down below what books you liked in October, and you can follow me on Twitter, Goodreads, and Instagram in the meantime. And I will see you in my next video.